Hello everyone and welcome to another video. RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 has a whole bunch of scenarios with lots of variation and they are often praised for being excellently designed. But what if I told you that most of the scenarios have the exact same map? Forest Frontiers, Dynamite Dunes, Evergreen Gardens and many more are all built on the exact same base layout, and several other scenarios are copies of each other too or share a lot of similar elements. In this video we shall take a look at how Chris Sawyer reused as many assets as possible to create the nearly 90 scenarios in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 as efficiently as he could. We'll also take a brief look at RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 to see if anything similar happened there. The very first scenario is Forest Frontiers. We don't know if this was actually the first one that was created, but it's the only order we have, so we'll go with that. It's a pretty simple map with a lot of random mountain tool spam around the sides and a few particularly shaped hills that we should take a closer look at. There's for example this one, which is a 3-unit tall hill with a long 45-degree tail, so we call it the 45-degree hill. There's also this hill, which has less of a defined shape, so we'll dub it the small blob hill. We're going to see these again, so remember them. Next up is Dynamite Dunes, which being a desert map looks completely different, but if you look carefully then you can see the same 45-degree hill and small blob hill in several places across the map. These are the exact same as the ones in Forest Frontiers, and it looks like Chris Sawyer just had a tool that allowed him to place a couple of preset hills with a single click, as there is no way these are all manually done and just happen to be identical. This map also introduces a third one of these presets with this small rectangle hill. The main feature of Dynamite Dunes are these two big hills, and those feel familiar. It is somewhat common knowledge that there are a few other desert scenarios that use the same map as Dynamite Dunes, but we've actually seen this before in this very video, as this is literally the exact same as the big hill in Forest Frontiers. Just look at it, it's identical and it's in exactly the same spot with 13 tiles between the hill and the edge of the map on both sides in both scenarios. And not only that, but the 3 small blob hills and one of the 45-degree hills are also in the exact same spot. Dynamite Dunes did add one extra 45-degree hill and a few rectangle hills and doesn't have the mountain tool spam and the lake, but otherwise they're just the same map. Let's see if this trend continues with the next scenario, Loopy Lake. It's harder to see, but yep, this too uses the same base map. This big hill is again in the same position, although it is edited a bit more. You can also see this 45-degree hill, this rectangle hill and part of the blob hill in these same positions relative to the big hill as in Dynamite Dunes. It doesn't feel as the same map because there's a massive lake and river added, there's a bunch of extra mountains and the trees are different than they were in Forest Frontiers, but it's definitely the same base layout again. Is Diamond Heights also the same? Here that big hill isn't in the exact same spot, so the base map is different, but that doesn't mean that there's no reuse of assets going on. For example, this hill looks awfully like the pointy hill that we've seen before, and this hill reminds me of the big hill in Dynamite Dunes, and they are indeed those. By looking at multiple different scenarios, I have isolated what I believe are the 5 basic preset hills that Chris Sawyer was able to quickly place anywhere. The rectangle and blob hill only show up in the classic Dynamite Dunes layout, but the other 3 have been used to create a lot of maps in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 and they're all over the place in Diamond Heights. Here's a big hill, here's another, again here, another one here, and here, and here, and here. In total I think I spotted about 14 of these hills as indicated by the checkerboard terrain pattern. Some of these are combined into one big hill with a big flat top, but I've looked at the shapes of the terrain and I am confident that Sawyer just overlapped a whole bunch of these big hills. I have also spotted 8 and maybe some more along the edge of the smaller Dynamite Dunes hill, the pointy one. Yeah, that's right, 4 of the main big hills in Diamond Heights are identical, just in different orientations, and most of you never noticed. Lastly, there's also a couple of 45-degree hills all over the place to finish it off. Don't worry though, as Evergreen Gardens is the same again, with the exact same big hill, pointy hills, 45-degree hills, rectangular hills and blob hills as in Dynamite Dunes. The water is markedly different from both Loopy Lake and Diamond Heights though, and the big hills on either side of the park entrance are also formations we haven't seen before. Let's keep those in mind as well, just in case they pop in again too. Bumbly Beach is a breath of fresh air with a nice beach map that has no sign of any big hills anywhere, so it's a completely different map from all the previous ones. Or is it? No, it's not. It's the same map again. Look at these hills. They're in the exact same position as in Evergreen Gardens and all the others. So, while heavily edited and it looks completely different, Bumbly Beach was also created from the same base layout as Dynamite Dunes, Evergreen Gardens, Leafy Lake and Forest Frontiers. Trinity Islands is actually different, although just like Diamond Heights, it's only different in the sense that those hills don't exist in those exact positions, as we do have 4 pointy hills, 3 big hills and a whole bunch of 45-degree hills. So again, it is reusing the same assets, although the third island does seem to be quite unique, and so is a significant part of the first island. Up next is Katie's Dreamland, and just like Diamond Heights, this is just a random spam of the big and pointy hills all over the place. Look for this 3-sided front, you can see it all over the map and it's all the same big hill. And there's also a whole bunch of long ridges on the map, all of which are the top bit of the same pointy hill. This one on the side does seem to be different though, as it's too wide to be a hill we've seen before, so it was probably custom made with the mountain tool. Poke Park looks to be another case of random hill spam, but upon closer inspection it's actually based on Diamond Heights. Take a look at all these areas that I have encircled and now watch them as I rapidly switch back and forth between the two maps. I have made all the trees, rides and paths invisible so that you can see the map better, and it's clear that significant portions are the exact same. This cannot be a coincidence, and while we cannot know how exactly they are related, the point is that they are. Either could be based off the other, or they could both be based on the same base layout, but since we don't know, I have decided that the first one in the scenario order is counted as the base map, which in this case is Diamond Heights. Next is Whitewater Park, which looks like it could be related to a previous preset hill spam scenario, but it's not. We do again see the same few hill types everywhere, that hasn't changed, but it does seem to be a unique arrangement of them, at least from what we've seen so far. Millennium Mines is again a map that we've seen before, and it's actually based on Poke Park. They are quite different, but there's enough similarities that I am confident that they are related. The thing that gave it away from me was the flat hilltop on the right, but there are many more giveaways as well. For example, the corner on the exact opposite of the map, the terrain work is again identical. These two hills also match up, as does this hill near the bottom. Enough has changed that they're clearly different maps, but they do share some genes. And that indirectly means that Millennium Mines is also based on Diamond Heights, but it's much closer to Poke Park, so I'll write that down as the base map for it. The next one, Carts and Coasters, is also related, but this time it's based on Katie's Dreamland. If we compare it to it, then it's obvious that large portions are the same. You can start at the water section with the two 45-degree hills in it on the right, and lots of other big and pointy hills are in the exact same positions as well. The left side does have some differences with different hills and water sections, but it's clear that these two maps are related and either one was copied from the other or they both use the same base layout. Mel's World is different again, although the Dynamite Dunes hills are truly inescapable, as of course they're all over the place here as well. This one's interesting, as Mystic Mountain seems to be the first scenario that doesn't have a single one of the preset hills, as it seems to all have been done with the mountain tool. Although actually, on closer inspection I do think I've spotted a 45-degree hill here. It is buried into a mountain, but the length of it and the position of the 1 unit drop match up exactly, so I still do think it is one of those. Still, from a terrain perspective, Mystic Mountain is the most unique scenario we've seen so far. Wait, hang on, I've just spotted something. That one half of the 45-degree hill is the exact same distance from the edges of the map as this one in Dynamite Dunes. It's all the same base map, it's inescapable. It's either Dynamite Dunes or it's some random spam of 3 preset hills. Granted, the mountains in Mystic Mountain do make it completely different, but it looks like the base layout was still the same. And this continues because Pacific Pyramids is a very obvious clone of Dynamite Dunes. The big hill is a bit lumpier and there's this extra hill here, but otherwise it's the exact same map, just with a different park boundary and some different scenery. Crumbly Woods is based on Millennium Mines. The similarities aren't too obvious, but there are still enough that I'm positive that they are related. There is half the pointy hill on the top right of the map that's the same, and on the opposite side there are also a lot of matching elements. These two hills are the same as well, and so are these two. These maps are fairly different, but I don't buy that all those terrain elements being in the exact same positions is a coincidence, so they must be related. Just like Bumbly Beach, Paradise Pier looks completely unique, but then you notice the one hill and it looks, again, familiar. The terrain around it is a bit higher, but if we measure from the top then it's 22 tiles away from the edge of the map on either side, which is the same distance as in Dynamite Dunes, meaning that even though all the other hills have been removed, this too was created from the same base layout. Lightning Peaks definitely isn't though, and unlike that one 45-degree hill in Mystic Mountain, here I cannot find a single preset hill, making it even more unique. It isn't the most fun to play, as the hills can get really annoying sometimes, although on the other hand that is also a nice challenge. We're nearing the end of the original game now, and Ivory Towers is a pretty clear copy of Crumbly Woods. There's a few differences here and there, but it's easy to see that it's the same map. We now have a chain that goes Diamond Heights, Poke Park, Millennium Mines, Crumbly Woods, Ivory Towers. While each of these is clearly related to the one before, at some point it has changed so much that I couldn't find any similarities anymore. I have stared at Diamond Heights and Ivory Towers for a good while and couldn't find any relation at all, even though distantly they are related. Very interesting how this works, kind of like a scenario of Theseus kind of deal. Rainbow Valley has a fair bit of mountain tool use obscuring the landscape below, but I was still able to find that it's related to Mel's World. This is one that I only found on my second go around. I had found a whole bunch of similarities, had written the script for this video, and then when I did one last check I suddenly found like 15 more relations, causing me to have to rewrite half the script. And finally, Thunder Rock. This massive rock on a completely flat plane is of course completely unique, and it's a fitting end to the original 21 scenarios. That means that out of the original 21 scenarios there seem to be only 8 unique maps, and the rest are based on one of those 8. Dynamite Dunes is the most popular scenario to copy with a total of 7 copies, so 8 scenarios are based on that same layout, which is nearly 40%. We're not done yet though, as we've still got the expansions to do and there is no shortage of repetition there either. The first one is Added Attractions, and it introduces a massive 30 new scenarios, but only 4 of those are not based on an earlier one. Those are Hydro Hills, Sprightly Park, Butterfly Dam and Coaster Canyon. They do all have some of the preset hills, so it is possible that they are based on another map, but that it's hard or impossible to recognize as so little of the map is left. In total I found 9 more scenarios that are based on Dynamite Dunes. These are Funtopia, Future World, Magic Quarters, Fruit Farm, Thunderstorm Park, Roman Village, Swamp Cove, Utopia Park and Urban Park. Some of these, like Fruit Farm, are incredibly obvious as it has almost all of the Dynamite Dunes hills and is otherwise pretty much entirely flat. Others, like Funtopia, are harder to recognize as the mountain tool was used a lot, so it looks very different. But you can still see the big hills and also a few of the smaller hills in the exact correct positions. 3 Monkeys Park should count as a 10th Dynamite Dunes actually, as it looks the most like Leafy Lake, which in turn is based on Dynamite Dunes. There are also 10 scenarios that share the origins of Diamond Heights. Whispering Cliffs, Gentle Glen, Giggle Downs and Joffrey Gardens look like direct copies, while others look more like one of the scenarios that's further down the chain. Haunted Harbor and Harmonic Hills seem to have Poke Park as their origin. Cannery Mines, Jolly Jungle and Mineral Park all look like Millennium Mines, and Rotting Heights has the most in common with Crumbly Woods. Then we have Adrenaline Heights being based on Katie's Dreamland, Pickle Park and Coaster Crazy being related to Mel's World, Barony Bridge sharing elements with Trinity Islands, Fun Fortress does that with Whitewater Park, and finally there's Fiasco Forest, which looks very much like one of the 4 original scenarios of Added Attractions, Sprightly Park. This kind of confirms my feeling that Added Attractions is quite a repetitive playthrough. I first noticed it in the goals, as a lot of them are getting somewhere in the range of 1000 to 1600 guests in 3 years, but now I've proven that a lot of the landscapes are similar too. There is still some variety, and even just changing the terrain color can work wonders, but as a whole it's a bit too repetitive for my liking. The second expansion, Loopy Landscapes, is a lot better. The goals are much more varied, and so are the scenarios. Iceberg Island is very unique, and so are Volcania, Crater Lake, Pleasure Islands, Tiny Towers and a couple more. Not only do 11 of the 30 scenarios in Loopy Landscapes not share any DNA with the previous one, but most of them don't even have any of the preset hills at all. The other 19 are based on previous ones though, with Razor Rocks, Crazy Craters and Southern Sands being versions of Dynamite Dunes. And so are Mega World Park and Paradise Pier 2, as they are copies of Leafy Lake and, unsurprisingly, Paradise Pier. We also got a few more in the Diamond Heights family, with Icarus Park being a close brother, while Arid Height, Dusty Desert and Nevermore Park look more like Millennium Mines, and Woodworm Park and Frightmare Hills have more in common with Crumbly Woods. Dragon's Cove and Octagon Park are both sisters of Katie and her dreamland, and Mel is popular here with Vertigo Views, Wacky Warren, Grand Glacier and Venus Ponds all being in her world. Icicle Worlds takes after added attraction Sprightly Park, and finally Thunder Rocks is a post-mitosis version of Thunder Rock. I quite like what they did with Terror Town, Sunny Swamps, Arid Heights and Dusty Desert. They did use the preset hills, but they shaved them off a few units above sea level, giving these scenarios a look we haven't seen before. That also made it a bit harder for me to recognize it, but especially in Terror Town these shapes are very obviously the pointy hill. Actually, there are a few more bonus parks available in RCT1. If you complete all the original 21 scenarios, you unlock Mega Park, which is an empty version of Mega World Park and is thus based on Leafy Lake. There are also 4 downloadable scenarios for RCT1, and they are all based on a different base game scenario. Fort Anachronism is Mel's World, PC Player is Dynamite Dunes, PC Gaming World is Whitewater Park, and Gameplay is Diamond Heights. And finally, there's a very curious scenario, Taiwan Park. This park was only included in the Taiwanese version of the game and was only very recently discovered by the Western world when someone posted about it on Reddit. Now, even though it doesn't look like it in any way, shape or form, this park is very clearly based on Leafy Lake. For starters, the goal of 500 guests in 3 years is the same, but so is the ride selection and the maximum loan. And all the guest settings, like their initial happiness, hunger, thirst and money, are identical as well. They probably took Leafy Lake and just created a different landscape without altering anything else. We didn't dive into any of this for the other scenarios because that would have been way too much effort. You can also get 3 scenarios based on real parks, Alton Towers, Blackpool Pleasure Beach and Hyde Park, but those are obviously unique, so I'm not really taking them into account. In total, that leaves us with the following score. Dynamite Dunes and its copies are represented 26 times, Diamond Heights and its descendants are responsible for 22 scenarios, Mel's World occurs 9 times, Katie's Dreamland 5 times, Whitewater Park and Sprightly Park 3 times, and Thunder Rock and Trinity Islands appear twice. That means that only 15 of the 87 scenarios that we have discussed are completely unique and unrelated to any other scenario, or at least not that I could find. Here is a list of all the scenarios and the one that I determined them to be related to. The ones with a dash are the ones that are copied at least once, and the ones with an X are the 15 completely unique scenarios. I am absolutely astounded that a massive 30% of all RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 scenarios use the same basic layout of Dynamite Dunes. Every scenario that uses it has altered it in some way, but by looking at different maps I have determined that this is the most basic form of it. There is one big hill that has 2 pointy hills merged into it. One is so deep into it that it's kind of hard to recognize, but you can also see the end of it sticking out. Then there's one more separated pointy hill, 2 45-degree hills, 3 blob hills and 4 rectangle hills, of which one is merged into the separated pointy hill. While not every map has kept all of these 13 hills do consistently show up in multiple scenarios, and no scenario based on this layout ever has a preset hill that isn't in here. We don't know whether the base version of this had grass or desert terrain, but I like it being desert, since this base map is most recognizable on the 3 desert maps of Dynamite Dunes, Pacific Pyramids and Southern Sands. Those are so similar that you can even combine them into one big park and have it work reasonably well. This was done by I'm Legos, and you can see elements of all 3 scenarios, with the entrances in their correct spots, the rides from Dynamite Dunes and Southern Sands, and some of the scenery where there is space from Pacific Pyramids. Looks quite cool, I must say. Other Dynamite Dunes maps, like Mystic Mountain and Bumbly Beach, are altered so heavily that you wouldn't ever notice it if you weren't looking for it, so it's not quite fair to say that they are the exact same map, but they do share origins. But even when it is very clear, like between Fruit Farm and Dynamite Dunes, they often still look nothing alike, which is a sign of how Chris Sawyer used repetition to great effect, making his life easier without compromising the quality of the game. Although I must say that I do find a lot of the hill spam scenarios like Katie's Dreamland, Crumbly Woods, Harmonic Hills, 3 Monkeys Park and more a bit repetitive, even if their maps are not related. A few more different of the preset hills wouldn't have hurt, as that would have introduced a bit more variety. There are still more parks that we can talk about for RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, and those are the competition parks, which were used for when they held competitions. For the Steel Twister Coaster one you get a unique map, but all the other ones are the exact same as just Loopy Lake, but you own a different part of the map. I didn't want to include these all in the count for Loopy Lake, as it seems a bit excessive and they're also not really scenarios, but it's still a reuse of an asset. Okay, that's RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, but what about RollerCoaster Tycoon 2? Here, not a single scenario is based on another one, and there are also none of the preset hills that we saw in RST1. A lot of these maps look like they have hastily been put together with the mountain tool, and they are generally quite uninspiring. Possibly the worst offender is Alpine Adventures, which has incredibly tall and pointy mountains and is very much not fun to build on. It's funny how the RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 scenarios are evidently more similar, but also feel more unique and better designed, which shows that a few good basic elements can outperform random nonsense. Okay, there's one exception, or rather 5, and that is that the build your own Six Flags scenarios are obviously just empty versions of the 5 recreations of Six Flags parks that come with the game, so technically there is some reuse of assets going on. The RST2 expansions, Wacky Worlds and Time Twister, are interesting. They're generally regarded as quite bad, and I agree with that, but the landscaping in these scenarios is stunning compared to everything else. Just look at these, they're beautiful. These were not made by Chris Sawyer, but rather by the company Frontier, and if there's one thing they did right, it's the landscaping. A beautiful waterfall, a gorgeous dinosaur valley, great rocky cliffs, and a wonderful mythological island. None of it is repeated though, so for this video it's not relevant. Chris Sawyer has made more games than just RollerCoaster Tycoon though, and before this came Transport Tycoon. Someone suggested to me that it could be possible that the 5 preset hills in the RST1 game came directly from Transport Tycoon. Now, I have never played this, so I went to the OpenTTT Discord server for help, and at first it seemed like these hills were indeed new in RST1. But thanks to someone called Rob, we did actually find them. Look, here is the big hill. It's identical, it's the exact same hill. And here is also the pointy hill, again, identical. And the other 3 smaller ones are also there, although they can be a bit harder to recognize as they go further down. That makes sense though, as the ground level in a lot of maps in RollerCoaster Tycoon is minus 1.5 meters, and it rarely goes lower, but the game can go down all the way to minus 9 meters. Therefore, it is logical that these preset hills do have stuff below the ground level of minus 1.5 meters that's in this base layout. I find it incredible that we actually found these hills in Transport Tycoon, showing that Sawyer really reused as many assets as he could while making his next game. And that was a look into how a lot of the scenarios you had no idea were related are actually just the same map with a few tweaks. It's also a story of how Chris Sawyer made the most of his time and did things as efficiently as possible, while indeed not having the quality of his games suffer very much at all. If you would like to hear me rant more about weird intricacies of the game, click here to learn why time is a complete mess. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.